So, Razor Leaf or Vine Whip? That is the question. And it's kind of controversial and up for debate. So, I'm going to give you my take on what I feel is the best option, as well as what I'm personally going to be running. Um, when you ask yourself this question, you have to consider, what do you want your Venusaur to do? And it depends on your play style. If you want a generalist that can apply more shield pressure, Vine Whip is probably your best option. And if you want Venusaur to do what Venusaur is supposed to do, you probably want Razor Leaf. And let's get into some details and kind of explain why I say this. So, if we look at PV Poke in the Battle Sims, and I've got Venusaur pulled up here with the standard Vine Whip Frenzy Plant set. Let's first look at the Quagsire matchup. So we're going to look at like 4 different matchups because it appears after like week 1, based on some tournaments I've seen online, like King's Tournament, that Quagsire, Lantern, Azumarill, and Slowbro are kind of like the most common water types that we're going to see. So basically, by choosing to run Razor Leaf over Vine Whip, like, you're still going to lose to the bugs. You're still going to lose to the fires, and you're still going to lose to the flyings like Mantine. So none of that's really changing. All that's changing is the stuff that you're supposed to be able to beat. So let's look at Quagsire here, and I'll show you. So I've got a standard moveset on Quagsire. Mudshot, Stone Edge, Earthquake is probably going to be the most common one. And if you run the sim, you will see that Venusaur dominates this matchup on paper. Like in all the shielding situations, even shields, you do really well. So even like in this 1 versus 1 shield scenario, you'll see that Venusaur wins with 80 HP left, and yeah, it's a pretty good matchup. So you think to yourself, well, what's the question here, Madison? And let me explain to you. So when you see this matchup, you'll see that by the time Venusaur finishes killing off Quagsire, look at the energy on this Quagsire. It has a Stone Edge ready to go, and it almost has an Earthquake. Now, none of the matchups are going to play out exactly according to these simulations. So what's most likely to happen is you're both going to start off with something, say, like you've got a Raichu, and they've got a water type or something that's not favorable. So they swap into their Quagsire. And when they swap into their Quagsire, you don't get to insta-switch back to your Venusaur to just dominate, right? So what's going to happen is this Quagsire is going to get off several fast moves during the time it takes you to think and react to bring in your Venusaur, as well as during the switch animation time. So when you start this battle off, it's not going to be exactly like it shows on the screen. What's going to end up happening is, if you look, these Mudshots get 9 energy for Quagsire. Is you're going to end up starting with, say, 2 or 3 Mudshots already done with against this Quagsire, and so this thing's probably going to have like 18, 27 energy already built up. So if you look at it starting with 18 energy, and you run this battle again, it's very different. It does not appear to be quite as dominating as it did before. So you can see in the 1 versus 1 shielding scenario now, it's a tie, and it comes down to as charge move priority. Or IVs, and that's not something that I like to have to deal with when I'm trying to use my Venusaur or go against things that Venusaur is supposed to beat. And this is a pretty conservative with only 18 energy. If Quagsire got to farm a little bit prior to this matchup and maybe goes into it with 40, 50 stored energy, this matchup looks totally different, to where your Venusaur actually loses a matchup that it's supposed to win. And that's because Stone Edge and Earthquake just hit so hard, and they do so much damage to Venusaur. And so when you look at this, like, it doesn't inspire a lot of confidence in this situation. But if we use Razor Leaf instead of Vine Whip, in the same scenario where Quagsire starts with a little bit of energy, and we do the battle again, totally different story. Venusaur is now doing what it's supposed to do and what you would expect your grass type to do against something that is twice as weak to grass, is that you win in all shielding scenarios. And then it just comes down to personal preference. If you want to save your shield and go for something like a 0 versus 0 shield matchup where you escape with just a sliver of HP, or if you want to burn a shield and then go into whatever they throw at you next with almost a completely healthy Venusaur. So in this matchup with Quagsire, I really like the Razor Leaf Venusaur, just because Quagsire is an incredibly dangerous Pokemon in this meta. It is like, it's public enemy number one, if we're being honest. And in my practice battles that I've done quite a few so far, I find the faster I get rid of Quagsire, the better life gets for me. Because Quagsire can just hit so many things so hard, and it charges so fast with that Mud Shot that it's not something you want to play around with and, think you can take out, but maybe not sure, depending on energy. I want something that can kill Quagsire and kill it fast. You kill it in 7 Razor Leafs, so about 7 seconds. 14 seconds according to this because of the charge animation time. But really, it only takes like 7 seconds to get off all these Razor Leafs. They hit so hard. So in this matchup, I like Razor Leaf. Now let's look at something else like Lantern. So let's go back to our Vine Whip. And once again, a standard moveset you're going to encounter on Lantern, a Water Gun, Hydro Pump, Thunderbolt. Let's change this all to no shields, and nobody has any starting energy. Perfect. And let's battle. So with your Vine Whip, Frenzy Plant, Venusaur, you're going to win. And you're going to win pretty convincingly. The only case that I could see this not going in your favor would be towards the end of a battle. Say Lantern already has some energy stored up, and maybe it has a shield and you don't. And then this 0 versus 1 shield matchup can get kind of dicey. But overall, I don't think that's going to be anything to worry about. So I think Vine Whip, Frenzy Plant will do just fine here. But take note, once again, that there are a couple instances where you could lose to a Lantern. Now, if we switch this over to Razor Leaf, you will see that the situation is completely different. Once again, just as before, we dominate every shielding scenario pretty convincingly, and it comes down to personal preference if you want to burn a shield and go into the next battle with more HP, or if you would prefer to save your shields and take it out that way. So it's personal preference once again. But we have another situation where Venusaur is doing what Venusaur is supposed to do. It's taking out Lantern. Now, I've also run across several people that like to run Quagsire and Lantern in the same lineup, or even just 2 waters. Water's an incredibly diverse typing, and so a lot of people like to run 2 waters in their lineup of 3. And if you have Vine Whip, Frenzy Plant, that's a viable strategy. But if you're running Razor Leaf and they don't know that you're running Razor Leaf, you can demolish their team of 3 pretty quickly and pretty easily. It's kind of ugly. So another advantage of running Razor Leaf is that people are going to expect you to run Vine Whip, and they think that they'll be able to switch or do 2 waters against you. And in reality, you've got Razor Leaf and they cannot, and it will end very poorly for them. Let's look at another matchup here. Let's look at the Azumarill matchup, because that one's going to be, I didn't think Azumarill would be that common in this meta, but based on tournament results that I've seen, Azumarill seems to be pretty common. So if we run our Vine Whip, that everybody is, I think, preferring and leaning towards against the standard Azumarill set, Bubble, Ice Beam, Play Rough. I do think you'll see Play Rough and Ice Beam just because they'll want Play Rough for the mirror match on Azumarills, so I don't think you're going to see a lot of Hydro Pumps. So if we run this matchup, you will see that while you do win, there are a few instances where Azumarill can come out on top. If it has stored energy, or if it has a shield when you don't, things can get pretty ugly with this Venusaur Azumarill matchup once again. And so there's just so many examples of Venusaur, you think you're in the clear and you can dominate, when in reality, based on the way battles play out, you probably can't. And you'll get burned by this if you practice enough, and hopefully it happens in your practice and not in your actual tournaments. But so we see that, and it's just because this Ice Beam, it hits really hard. I mean, 76 damage. It does like half of Venusaur's health, a little more than half. But if we change this and we run Razor Leaf, you will see that this is totally different. We win convincingly in all the matchups, especially if we're willing to burn a shield. But even if not, we are still able to possibly squeak out some wins. It beats Azumarill even if Azumarill has 2 shields and you have none, just because Razor Leaf hits so hard. And it's my personal preference. I think you guys see where I'm going with this, that I want my Venusaur to do what my Venusaur is supposed to do. because I'm running other things that depend upon Venusaur taking out either Quagsire or their water typings, like when I run my double water strategy of Mantine Quagsire. I'll link to that video in the description below if you guys want to check that out. But Venusaur is a key part of that because it really needs to be able to defeat Quagsire and the water typings. And I don't want to have to dance around with maybe I can beat them, maybe I can't, and have to worry about the shield scenarios. I want to be able to chunk in Venusaur and know what's going to happen, that, you know, in 10 Razor Leafs that I've deleted them. The most interesting matchup, I think, is Slowbro. So when you match Venusaur up against Slowbro, Slowbro has confusion, and it hits really hard, and it hurts Venusaur a lot. And so when you look at this Vine Whip matchup against the set that most people are going to run with their Venusaur, and we do a simulation for it, we don't win. Very often anyways. At least we have to have Slowbro with no shields. If Slowbro shields once, then it's game over for us because Confusions hit so hard. But with Razor Leaf, you will see that this is a totally different story. We are the favorite in this matchup. Not by a lot, granted, but we are a favorite. And that's just because Razor Leaf chops into Slowbro. You guys get the point at this point. Razor Leaf to a water type is like death. So one thing that I have noticed in my practice battles is that when I'm able to pull this off, and you know, say I use Venusaur to defeat Quagsire, for example, my Razor Leaf Venusaur, and let's see, let's go back to no shields. You know, maybe I have to burn a shield, maybe I don't, but overall, it looks pretty similar to where you're going to escape with almost full health, and about both of your charge moves are going to be halfway up. So after their Quagsire gets deleted, they're going to think, well, they need to counter it. So they'll bring in something like Charizard or Fortress or something like that, Ninetails maybe. And so if you look at what you can do, whoops, I should not do it this way. Be smart, Madison. Continue battling. So if you look at what happens when you continue this battle on, and they bring in a counter like Charizard after you've defeated their Quagsire, they're going to have something like, nope, that was right, Dragon Claw. You'll be able to see that you do reasonably well in a lot of these matchups. You can take a big chunk out of Charizard's health. You can take a big chunk out of Fortress's health. You have options. It's not like you're totally sacrificing your Venusaur because you have Razor Leaf. It's still going to hit a lot of things really hard. I had a practice battle just a few minutes ago where I swapped in my Venusaur against a switch-locked Quagsire, just deleted the thing like it was supposed to, and they didn't have a Charizard or a Mantine. They were using, Charizard or a Fortress. They were using a Mantine as their Grass-type killer, so they brought in Mantine. And those Razor Leafs hit Mantine incredibly hard. Like, let's actually see what happens in that matchup here. I believe it was a Wing Attack, Aerial Ace, Water Pulse Mantine. I could be wrong on that. But they chop into Mantine incredibly hard. So even if Mantine shields, you're going to see that you're going to get about halfway through a Mantine. So you can take out a Quagsire and about half, on average, depending what they bring in, whether it's Fortress, Charizard, Mantine, Ninetails, you're going to get about half of that next Pokemon, health down as well. So you can take out a Pokemon and a half with a Razor Leaf Venusaur using either 0 or 1 shields, just depending on what your swap-in situations look like. But that's pretty good. Trading 1 for 1.5 of your opponent's Pokemon is what I consider a good trade. And you have that peace of mind that Venusaur does what Venusaur is supposed to do. And you don't have to get worried about, eating 2 Earthquakes in a row from a Quagsire, because that's not fun. And then, next thing you know, your Quagsire counter's gone, and, well, you've been wrecked. And you don't want to see that. You don't want to see that in tournament play. So, this is my take on Venusaur, is that I prefer the Razor Leaf moveset. Even though you're not going to get to those charge moves as quickly, you're not going to be able to spam Frenzy Plants. It does better in performance in actual matchups, in my opinion. Just being able to hit it hard and fast. And if people can't think quick enough and they don't switch fast enough, you can delete half a Quagsire before they can swap out, even if they aren't switch locked. So it does really good. It catches people off guard, and that's one of the key key points and ways to win your tournaments is doing something unexpected. Don't just do random stuff that doesn't make sense, of course, but if you can do something unexpected that your opponent wasn't prepared for, like a Razor Leaf Venusaur or running Solar Beam on a Ninetails, which, by the way, check out my Ninetails video, I'll link to that one as well, is incredibly satisfying because you can just one-shot things that aren't supposed to be one-shotted and feels all good inside. Feels good in the jellies, if you know what I mean. And yeah, so let me guys know what you think. Leave me some comments down below if you're going to run Razor Leaf or Vine Whip, what your thoughts are. Do I have it totally wrong? I'm open for discussion. I love the feedback. But make sure you hit that subscribe button and ding the little bell next to it to receive notifications if you guys want all the best tips, tricks, and team building strategies for not just Rainbow Cup, but all the Silph arenas. And until next time, just tap harder.